This is the Clean Energy Show with Brian Stockton and James Whittingham.
Hello and welcome to episode 55 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
And I'm James Whittingham. Welcome to our weekly discussion about clean energy and transportation. Brian, you know what? They're not calling it clean tech anymore. They're calling it climate tech. Maybe we should... I heard that on a podcast last week. Have you ever heard that?
No, I'm not sure that'll catch on, but okay.
Well, these are policy geeks. These are people who are knee-deep in climate policy and technology. Anyway, coming up on the show this week, a look at the modern solar farm that's coming to the corner of the world that Brian and I live in, which I find very exciting and interesting because we don't have any solar farms here where we live in Saskatchewan, not a grid-scale one. First-hand account of how dedicated Elon Musk is from Sandy Munroe. Different kinds of gravity storage I've discovered, although... Brian, you talked about a crane once lifting. Well, apparently there's other kinds as well. And Canada announces $2.75 billion in investment in zero-emission buses and charging infrastructure, which is exciting to hear for where we live. One of Australia's last brown coal power stations is to close early in favor of a giant battery, not a wind turbine, not a solar farm, but a giant battery. I find that interesting. VW announces its own Tesla-like battery day and will produce cells in Spain. That I'm looking forward to as well. How are you this week, sir? Are you managing the last of the pandemic?
Yeah, and the last of the winter, too. We had a sort of a big surprise snowfall yesterday, but yeah, hopefully it melts today.
You had icicles on your Tesla cam. I saw them this morning.
Yeah, I sent you a picture of that. I thought it was pretty funny. The rear-facing camera on the Tesla, I went to back up this morning, and there were 4 icicles very clearly hanging in front of the lens, which I thought was kind of funny.
Why do you think that is? It wasn't, the cameras weren't heating and melting water, were they?
It's, no, it would have been warming up on the trunk. So there's snow piles up on the trunk, and it started to melt, and yeah, just formed 4 icicles right in front of the camera.
So I woke up this morning and looked in the mirror at my COVID hair, and I thought, that's kind of Keith Richardsy from, 1970. So I've covered my camera, and I will now reveal my untouched bed hair, although it has been tamped down by headphones. But here we go. 3, 2, 1, prepare to scream.
Wow. It's not the best shot. You should have set up the shot better before you...
Yeah.
And not to mention that this is an audio podcast. You know that, right?
Well, describe my hair. It's like a mop in a hurricane. Let's just put it that way. It's unkempt. It's scary.
It looks a bit like a perm. Did you get a perm?
I know it looks like a perm. That's kind of the interesting thing about it is that it's kind of wavy and curly and doing its own thing. In fact, I have a knot in the back that I have to get out. It's so long that if I don't brush it like a little girl, like my daughter has to do every night, then I have knots in my hair. And Brian, last week after the show, my wife had a flat tire in the Prius, and we haven't had a flat tire, I don't know, since poverty times. It made me feel poor. Yes, the tires on the car are overdue. Yes, they're a bit bald. Yes, I'm stretching it. So I went down to her work when my son got home with the Leaf and took an air compressor with me and thought, well, she drove over it a bit. It looks completely dead flat, like there wasn't a whiff of air in it. This is not going to hold air. But miraculously, it held air. So we washed it for a few minutes, and Canadian Tire, where we would get the thing changed, was about 5 minutes away. So we drove there, but my wife decided to take the longest route possible. And my son pointed out that she crossed not 1 train track, but 2. And my wife is notorious for always hitting trains going home from work. And she curses herself every day because we have trains going through the city. It's just stupid. Yeah, and then we got the tires replaced that night, and we got there just at closing time, and my wife was saying, don't these tires look funny to you? And I was looking at them, and the wheel covers were not put on, and they cover kind of interesting but not terribly pleasing wheels that the Prius has if you don't have the wheel covers on. They almost look like wheel covers themselves. The bastards lost one of our wheel covers. Or broke it and didn't say anything. But because it was closing time, it created a big problem. And the next day, the guy actually looked at the video. And he said, no, they look like they're on. Oh, but those aren't the wheel covers. Those are the wheels. And he was looking at the gas station footage from the other side of the lot. He went to great trouble to do this, but there was no footage of the side in question. And I'm only 99.9% sure that they were all there. We all think they were all there. Yeah. And it's a pisser because we bought 4 tires so they all look the same, and now they don't. Because we did have to, this is the second flat she had. One was not so dramatic, and we bought a crappy tire. It's a leased car, so we bought crappy discount tires. Yeah. So just because we have to turn the car in a year, and these tires will last a year and be adequate enough, I'm sure. But still, it was, I hate that Canadian tire.
Well, worst case scenario, you should be able to get a wheel cover on eBay or something. Just buy one.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I don't want to, though. I mean, I'm cheap and, the tires. Are you going to tell people about what you bought this week? Are you going to tell people? You're going to talk about that?
Oh, yeah, I totally forgot. But yeah, I ordered a folding electric bicycle, which I've been kind of wanting to do for a long time.
Congratulations. I'd have applause standing by, but I don't. What made you finally go for that decision?
Well, the one I'd wanted, and we discussed this on the podcast maybe as much as a year ago, but the Fido D11 was kind of the one that I was eyeing. This is a kind of a bike that came out about a year ago with an Indiegogo campaign, but there was no way to get it shipped to Canada. But it was basically everything I wanted: something lightweight, folding, electric bicycle with decent range, decent sized battery, battery in the seat post, which I really like, so you can take out the seat post and charge it. And just finally found a place that is selling them in Canada. So
how does that work?
Yeah, the battery's in the seat post. So, you just pull it out and take it inside to charge it. It's quick release. I guess the downside is if I'm out shopping or something and I'll lock up the bicycle, you probably want to take the seat post with you in case, somebody nicks it. But, so I'm not sure how long it's going to take to get here, but I thought it was a good time to order it. I was, hoping to order something before the spring arrives. And so, yeah, I should have a bicycle for the spring.
I got mine about April 3rd or 5th, the very beginning of April last year. And I remember it was snowing and wintry, and I still went out. I have a picture of my daughter driving through snow, all happy on it. We've had some good times on that bike. My battery locks onto the frame, but I'm not, I've said this before, if you're new to the podcast, I don't like leaving it there because it's a big fat $350 plus tax item that's just sitting there. And it is a fun item. I mean, it's got a USB port. You can power things for days. It's a good battery backup thing. But you wanted a folding bike to take to put in the back of your Model 3 and go to the lake and have it here and there and wherever you want it, right?
Yeah, and if, I drive to Winnipeg or something, I can have a bike, easily throw it in the car. And I've used bike racks before on cars, and just don't like doing that. It's a big hassle. So, yeah, it was time to shift to something that was easier to move around.
I don't know if they would let you, but would you ever consider taking it on a plane trip, a vacation trip? It'd be very heavy.
That's a good idea. Yeah, you'd probably have to pay an extra baggage fee for having an extra bag. But yeah, there's probably like a sort of a little shipping carry case you can put it in for sure.
The battery is considered a dangerous cargo, I think. Any lithium battery. Oh, yeah.
So that has to go carry on, or it can't go at all?
I don't know. It's not like I've been flying lately. I don't know what's going on. I just know that lithium batteries are considered dangerous cargo. Anyway, so that's exciting news, Brian. You had your non-e-bike stolen in Vancouver out of the back of your Model 3 last summer, and which was tragic, and somehow the car wasn't locked and the Sentry mode wasn't working, wasn't turned on. It was like a plane crash. It was a confluence of different things that went wrong.
Yeah, it was everything went wrong. There was a Tesla dash cam footage that was out on the internet yesterday about somebody with a carjacking.
I just watched that this morning. Minutes ago. That was crazy.
Footage is crazy because you can see the guy pull out the gun, point it at the car, and then, the Tesla drives away quickly.
With instant torque. And I noticed he did it right at the moment the guy went for the door handle. Of course, the door handle is not easily accessible.
Yeah.
What, Brian Stockton, would have you done in that situation?
Well, I don't think I would have known what to do, but now watching the video, I would know, be ready to take off quickly. I think that's what I would do.
I don't know. I see the people have said that, just track the car because you can track the car after he takes it. But
That's
do you
true,
really
yeah.
want to get out with a guy with a gunpoint? I think I would just bolt out of there but there's a bullet hole in his car. Last week there was a Tesla cam video from our city of a truck, a big semi truck going through a back alley and taking down a power line seemingly effortlessly. It seemed like it just nicked it. It just fell right over and brought a power line, caused a power outage in our downtown. And, he's got that. I don't think he submitted it anywhere, but you could see the power line hit the car on the Tesla cam footage. So, yeah, people were joking, well, did you get a free charge out of it? How many kilometers did you get?
Yeah, well, I think in most circumstances, when somebody pulls a gun on you, just do whatever they say.
Okay, that's...
But if you're in the car and you have a chance to hit the accelerator, maybe take off.
It was just... yes, the Tesla cams and the Sentry cam footage are just showing us how ridiculous the world is. It's crazy that... it's true that everybody has cameras on their phones now, but they're not always recording. Now we're getting stuff from Tesla. You can go to channels and watch we did that. The family sat around the TV the other day and watched Tesla cam footage. And the people were laughing and crying and, shocked. It was good entertainment. All the crazy things that go on in the world. And as we get more and more Teslas on the road, we're going to see just how stupid and crazy humanity is and how dangerous it is and how, you see car accidents. You very seldomly see footage of car accidents in North America. More and more now, but with cam footage on the dash cam footage. But I'm always confused as to how car accidents happen. But you can see them happening on their pilot error.
Yeah.
So, Brian, what would your car of the year be right now? I'm a little disgusted in some of the new EVs that have come out. They seem exciting, and you look into it and you think, no, that one's only charging at 50 kilowatts. It should be charging at least 150. Some Teslas charge at 250. And that means that you have to sit there for an hour. I'm not going to sit for an hour and charge a car on the highway. I don't want to. Not now. 10 years ago, okay, but not now. What would you pick?
No, a lot of bugs to be worked out. Like the Volkswagen ID4 is kind of the latest one to get a bunch of reviews because that's now kind of out in the wild in America. So we're seeing some of those reviews. But the surprising thing there, in terms of charging, so Volkswagen has built this Electrify America network as part of their Dieselgate penalty. And yet the Volkswagen car doesn't work very well with the Electrify America network. So this will all get resolved. But I think like when we chose our car of the year, it was the Tesla Model Y, but I think you were kind of pushing for the Ford Mustang. Was that it?
Yeah, I was because, sometimes this happens with award shows, but it's like the latest thing that comes out gets the attention, with film award shows. So I just think that it's going to make a big impact on the marketplace because Tesla, the Model Y it's another version of the 3, and it's better and it's more sought after in our market, in a lot of markets actually. But the Mach-E has a dealership system, and they seem to have done a good job with it. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and it apparently, like the videos I watched, it works better with the Electrify America charging network. It and the Volkswagen both have potential for over-the-air updates, which, that should fix any issues with, Volkswagen and the charging network. I don't know that they've actually sent out any over-the-air updates
they haven't
yet. But, the fact that both of those work with a proper kind of software architecture like that is good news. And but yeah, the Ford Mustang Mach-E, it does kind of seem to be the best of the bunch in terms of, what's been released lately outside of Tesla.
If I have any disappointment in the Mach-E, it's its acceleration speed. It seems like they tamped it down with software that would probably be more capable than it is. And it's a Mustang, so you want fast. So maybe they didn't want to outdo all other cars that they're selling that in the sports car category and make them look bad. I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist by nature, but it seems possible.
And there's
Brian,
market segmentation too, where, if you want the better acceleration, you have to get the more expensive one.
right. So I had a relative in Calgary last time we were there, which was a couple summers ago, thanks to COVID. We went by a solar farm in Brooks, and that's the first solar farm that I've seen in Canada. Like, I don't get around much, but it's when we went down south, between here and Colorado and Vegas and Arizona and all those places in California, they're all over the place, especially in the desert. And they're a sight to see. Like, we got out of the car and walked up to the fence and just took it all in. It's a beautiful and amazing thing. However, sometimes they put them on hills, which I don't care for because they make the hills look ugly, and I can understand that. A relative in Calgary, though, said, "Oh, that solar farm, that went out of business. They went bankrupt." And so I thought, really? Solar farms don't really go bankrupt. And so I've been trying to find information on it. And yeah, the reason why I looked back into it again is because it was in the news. Like, I saw a news story that said that they were doubling the size of it. And I thought, well, if it's out of business, why are they doubling the size of it in Brooks, Alberta? But I eventually found a story by accident that there was a solar system, a thermal solar system in Medicine Hat, which is not Brooks, Alberta. It's about 45 minutes away, I guess. It's a different place. And they had a mirror solar system, which I didn't know about. The ones that reflect the sun at a tower and boil water?
Yeah.
And that creates electricity. They wanted that for their municipal services. They spent many millions on that only 5 years ago or something, and it doesn't work very well because it's not Nevada. We need heat here, and it has to fight minus 40 instead of plus 40. And I guess they had to take the snow off the mirrors and clean the mirrors, and it just wasn't working out, and now they're taking it down. So that was what he was talking about. That doesn't work. Maybe it doesn't work in Canada. I mean, do you think that we should just give up? But some people question that technology, period. Like, why are we doing that? But there's a few of those around, and they're in hot places, but they seem to work.
Yeah, it always seemed a bit weird to me. It just, when you have photovoltaic, why not just skip all those extra steps and just go straight from sun to electricity? That seems to make more sense to me.
It does. Yeah, and I'm not sure the exact specifics of it, but yeah, it was interesting to see that, though. There's another thing that happened in Wyoming. Wyoming's an interesting place to me because we've gone through it a couple times, and the family has been always confused by Wyoming. Like, you go into the Walmart there, and they have walls and walls of people who have died in wars of the local community. And I found that, it's honoring them, but it's also like, oh yeah, this is a very militaristic country. Like, you really get woken up. You would not see that in Canada, mostly because we haven't gone to any wars. We haven't started any wars. And then you realize, well, it's had a huge effect on this small city here. But the coal is huge in Wyoming. We drove by coal mines, and then every time you see a train, it goes on forever, and it's full of coal going to somewhere to be burned and put into the atmosphere. But wind energy is making a comeback, and it's on a local scale. The wind is helping change things because people say, well, it's going to create jobs, it's going to create money, people are going to lease the lands. But they don't care about climate change. Climate change is off the picture. In fact, most people in Wyoming don't believe in climate change. They will tell you that it's just a temporary shift and natural shift in the climate that happens all the time. Of course, that's bull crap because those shifts have happened, but never, ever anywhere near this fast. Like, it's just, it'd take 1,000 times longer than it is now or more. So local leaders say that they're being pragmatic about it, and but it's an interesting thing because the story, I think it was in the Times or Washington Post, and they were saying that the wind company, they were talking to a sign company who builds signs for people, and they used to build signs for coal. There are still coal plants there, but some of them have gone bankrupt, and it's going down. The wind companies are just starting, and all of their sign business has gone to wind companies, and it's because this is the thing that I think is an important message. With companies, industries, technologies that are going up are going to spend more money than the ones that are going down and trying to preserve their ass from going out of business. They're going to stop spending. So even if they're in business, even if they're employing people, they'll employ as few as possible, and they won't spend any money. And this is one of the things that I think is important to know about the new green technologies, the green energy part of the energy sector. They're going to spend more money.
Yeah, so the business to business spending is going to switch from, a lot of money going, in and out of the oil companies to a lot of money going in and out of the clean tech companies.
And it's not just jobs, it's business to business and jobs around. It's like when we canceled the film industry in Saskatchewan, it wasn't just the film workers, it was the hotel workers, it was the restaurant workers, it was the clothing suppliers and different people like that. It wasn't just these things affect everyone. So we are getting, to my surprise, came across this on Twitter. Somebody tweeted it to us. If you're listening, thank you. Can't remember your name. That is this Weyburn newspaper story, which is a small city, about 10,000 or so, an hour and a half south of us. And I happened to be in Weyburn last week. I was telling you that I was driving up and I could see the dump practically from Weyburn. We have such a big landfill here. There's a mountain on the flat prairie. So, I looked at where it's going to be. It's going to be just outside of town. It's going to be right next to a substation for our power utility, which is owned by the government. And so they don't have to spend any money on that, connecting it to the grid. It'll be right beside the grid. And they've been studying this for years before they put it in, and they had public meetings, and people wanted to know, is it going to reflect light on the highway? Is it going to blind me? Because, to my shock and surprise, it's not just going to be a solar farm like the many that I saw in the States. It's going to be a tracking solar farm. So it's going to track the sun across the sky at the optimal angle. Now, I have a little 100-watt solar panel for my camper. And if you adjust the angle, you can see how the voltage goes up and down. So you can actually study it in real time, how important an angle is. So if you drive by my house in the summer and I'm charging my battery, you'll see it propped up and not flat on the ground, but you'll see it propped up on top of my camper with a chunk of wood. And the reason is because you'll get a lot more volts out. So, you and I have solar panels on our roof, but they're not even at the best of times at the optimal angle. So what they'll do in a farm is place them and follow the sun across the sky, right, automatically. And I presume they'll also adjust for the different angles. We have a very different angle of optimal attack of solar panels here because we live in a normal northern climate, and in the wintertime it's practically vertical to get the optimal. It's a little bit off of vertical. It's not that far.
Usually when you're building a big farm like this, it's like this tracking equipment is very expensive.
Yeah.
So instead of doing that, you just put in twice as many solar panels, like kind of for the same price. But I suspect that because the weird angle of the sun in the winter and the fact that it's a very high sunshine area, like that it makes it worth it, like that there's so much sunshine that it makes it worth it to put in the expensive tracking gear.
This is something that I have to ask them about. I've got to ask them. This is a burning question for me because it is so much more expensive. Solar panels are getting so cheap, but it's so expensive to put in tracking and other people aren't. I want to know how that plays out economically because there's 2 First Nations involved in the financing. And sometimes First Nations get extra financing from the federal government, and they also have, a subsidy from the federal government because it's solar. Are they spending in a different way that a private company is spending? Are they spending extra? I'd like to talk to them and find out, and I'm going to do my best to track them down and ask those.
Yeah, it could be that there's subsidies there that make it more viable than it normally would be.
But even so, do you really throw money around like that? I want to know, is it worth it?
And of course, the other thing you didn't mention is that they're also bifacial solar panels, which is crazy.
And I have not heard of bifacial anywhere going up. In fact, this is such an amazing project that I'm suspicious of it. Like, is this really happening? Is this a boondoggle of somebody stealing money from First Nations and telling them that they're going to build a monorail and they're not? Like, they're going to start working on it and it'll be a year from the fall or something like that. So, they've done studies on birds and the reflection of light and, everything else. Just because you're putting up solar panels doesn't mean you don't have to do environmental studies. So that costs money and takes time. And so they're bifacial, which means that they pick up reflection of sun off the ground. Now, in Canada, we have the luxury of having snow. So
Yeah.
it will actually, I assume, and this is something I'd like to ask them about, are you going to get snow reflection that, say Arizona won't get?
Yeah, no, I think again that's what makes it. It must be a really good idea, hopefully, or they wouldn't be doing it.
And those tracking equipment, they do adjust the angle because they are saying that you can, if it snows on them, you can put them vertical and the snow will come off. So you have automatic dumping of snow. That might factor into it as well because it costs money to take snow off panels and keep them operational. It would take labor and equipment to do that, and this is built in. And they go flat if there's a windstorm, which we have here in Saskatchewan.
Yeah, yeah.
Ask my house how it suffered in January with a ridiculous windstorm. The worst I've ever seen, actually, summer or winter. And, and then on top of that, the icing on the cake, the cherry on top, they're going to have sheep grazing underneath of it. They're going to plant crops and have multi-use of the land, which I think is, this is like the ideal solar project right here. We were not supposed to get things. We don't have any solar farms, and now we're getting like the coolest one in the world.
No, and we've been complaining a lot how we're really behind on the clean energy transition here, and suddenly we're way ahead of everybody.
One of our listeners, John, liked to point out that I have more solar panel power going into the grid than our utility does. Me. And I've got a 3.3 kilowatt system on my house. It's crazy and it's embarrassing and stupid. This is an expensive system. And there's more. I'm not done yet, Brian Stockton. They're going to it's a 10 megawatt system, but it's going to produce 13 megawatts, and they are going to quote unquote spill 3 megawatts. I have questions. Why are you doing that? Why are you overbuilding? Because SaskPower, the utility, will only let them put 10 into the system. So why did they overbuild it? What are the economics of that? What's the thinking of that? I can think of some reasons. You're not going to get you're not going to get that 13 megawatts all the time, only a short amount of time, say on a May day at 1 o'clock at the solar noon in Saskatchewan. So that's that you would have extra, my systems are not optimal all the time, but mine does hit peak output, what it's rated at.
Yeah, but their system is capped at 10, but it can make a bit more than that. But it would be probably fairly rare that they would make more than
right. That. And especially in the wintertime. So that's interesting, though. You don't really hear about people overbuilding and wasting any electricity like that. So it speaks to how economic it is for that. There's also, I think, a couple of other projects going up in Saskatchewan, at least one more solar farm going up somewhere. Why they didn't do this 10 years ago and study it and learn from it and then realize what they need to do to the grid, if anything. It boggles my mind why this didn't happen years ago. They didn't have to build, a solar farm of the same size, but they could have built a modest one and studied it, for God's sake.
Yeah. Well, I think that there was some concern about utilizing the resources we already have, which is unfortunately coal. We have a very large coal infrastructure kind of in that same area south in the province. And so, they started talking about carbon capture and storage here quite early, like a long time ago. I think the discussion started maybe 20 years ago, trying to do carbon capture at our coal plant in the south of the province. Took them a long time to get it going, and it took, something like $1.5 billion to get it going, and it is running, and it is capturing carbon, so it is making our coal plant cheaper. But of course, because it's a fossil fuel province, that's what everyone was focused on, especially, 10, 20 years ago. You can kind of understand it because the solar and wind technology is not where it is now.
I can't believe how fast this show is going. We're going to have to either have a record-length show here or because I got more on solar. I've got more.
So much to cover.
Yesterday, I listened to a very interesting podcast from my namesake, Mr. Ed Whittingham, who is in the province next door. We established on an earlier podcast that I don't know if I'm related to him. I might be. He doesn't look like a Whittingham. My my Neanderthalish branch of the family that he doesn't look like. But he is a climate, oh gosh, what would you call him? A policy person. Like he worked for the Alberta government at one point under Notley before, and that's the oil sand capital of Canada if you're listening from far away. And I hope you are. He had, basically they did this little virtual conference on Zoom for the Alberta Solar Association, or the group of solar people in Alberta, when solar's doing quite well in Alberta right now, installations and such. And he came on and said, he's one of the hosts, actually, one of the regular hosts. They did a podcast as part of the virtual conference for solar people. And he teaches at Harvard. I can't remember his name. I apologize for that. But he came in and said, we should not have any solar in Canada. He told us to the Solar Association of Alberta. And basically, he wants to run a power line to Arizona. This is not a stupid, crazy man. He has studied this. He says it's not crazy. He said you put solar in Alberta or in Arizona, and you run a DC line, which would be half the length of the longest ones that China and other people are doing. So it's not crazy. And then you get solar winter and summer. And I'm thinking, while I'm listening to the podcast, I'm going online and I'm looking, well, what's the solar output on the annual output for Arizona compared to Alberta? And it was something like Alberta's 75% of what Arizona is. Okay, well, solar's cheap. You just build a bigger solar farm, and whatever the cost of that line is. And what people asked in the Q&A, well, what happens if Trump gets in and turns off the power to all of Alberta? A Trump in the future, be 20 years down the line or something. He said that he's strictly concerned about carbon into the atmosphere, and governments have to spend the least amount of, they can't throw money around. They can't have cutesy projects that don't actually take carbon out of the atmosphere for the best money. Because if you're not spending your money wisely, you're wasting it. And there are efficient ways of doing it. And he's not wrong. I mean, rooftop solar is the most expensive solar on a house, solar on a house, rooftop solar, as we call it, is the most expensive solar it is, because it's small scale. And a lot of that money is in the permitting and construction and installation and everything, and the maintenance and everything. So yeah, I mean, I can't really disagree. We should be making solar farms. We should have the opportunity, you and I, to buy into, to put, $1,000 into a solar farm, a community solar farm, a bigger one, perhaps managed by the utility, and get an investment back on that in 15 years or 10 years or 8 years or 5 years or whatever it'll be, instead of having to put it on our roof. We shouldn't have to do that. It does help with distributing, the power load and everything like that. And if you combine it with the power wall, which will be cheaper in a few years, it might make economic sense for backup power on your own home.
Well, I think the power sovereignty issue is relevant there. I mean, I think you want to have as much power generation in your own country, I think, as possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess he's arguing the cost of the cable and the cost of buying or renting the land in Arizona would be worth it, that you would just get more power, more bang for the buck that way.
I assume it has something to do with just the Alberta's cloudy winters. I mean, overall, they have pretty good solar like we do in a lot of places. But you're going to have that hit. You need something like that. Another thing that was talked about is sort of bad. How are we going to store that? How are we going to store it in Canada? Because a lot of Alberta and Saskatchewan, we don't have much for it in the way of hydro. But when you use pumped hydro, when you pump the water, when you have a dam already giving you hydro, you can use pumped hydro from the solar, from the excessive solar, from the excessive wind, and store that in the water that you pump upstream and get it back later. So that's very interesting to me. And just the notion, I mean, the first time I heard about this was actually the dam in Las Vegas, the Hoover Dam, that they were thinking about doing that. And I thought it was a bit crazy, but you can do it. And it's one of the cheaper ways to store power. Mind you, most people still don't believe what Tony Seba does, and that is the fact that batteries, chemical storage, as we call it in the business, will be very cheap in 10 years. Maybe not everywhere, but they'll start making sense then.
Yeah, I think batteries will eventually supplant all of these other things like, pumped hydro. But I don't know, several months ago, we talked about, there was a Guardian story about a solar farm possibly going up in Australia with a big cable to send the power to, it was like Indonesia or Thailand or something like that. And
Right.
again, for the same reason,
Yeah.
like Australia has plenty of space and lots of sunshine. So it makes more sense to put the solar farm there and then, just put the cable through the ocean.
So he said the lines lose about 6% of electricity. So he thought 94% efficient was very good. And but other people pointed out that there was like a yellow vest movement, which is sort of a populist protest movement in Canada, some places in Canada, where they're what would you call them? Libertarian or just jackasses?
Both.
Okay. Well, there was this was before the current yellow vest movement where they're against masks and people who look different than them, I think, ultimately. So they were sort of, how can I describe it? Oh, the power, they were against power lines, I guess. Like they were talking about putting new power lines in Alberta, and there was a protest movement against it. And even the solar farm that I was talking about that is doubling in size, the local farmers were saying, no, we need to make hay there. You can't put solar on farms. And of course, they're not getting their hay from that farm. And you could still feed animals on that farm like they're going to do here, smaller animals, if you wanted to. I don't know how much you can harvest. I do know that mixed use solar farms in hotter climates, they're being used for vegetation, for food vegetation that requires partial shade. So you get a little bit of the sun and then it goes and shades it for part of the day and the hours are less. So that's interesting too. Then there's the idea that Europe, I believe, is it Europe? Europe is like running this big cable to Africa to put solar in Africa. And he said, well, that is going to be politically unstable. That's going to be questionable because Africa is a lot less stable than the relationship that Canada and the U.S. have. For instance, we put a lot of hydropower into the States from our end on the East Coast. So maybe there's a tit for tat there where we would be more secure. Like we would cut off our power if you cut off ours in the West. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, nothing really to add, I don't think.
Okay. Brian, it's time for our exciting new segment. What do you think?
What do you think?
This is a new segment where I ask a number of questions to Brian because I'm genuinely curious what he thinks. Okay? So, questions have arisen for the corrupt postmaster DeJoy in the United States over the UPS, United States Postal Service gas guzzler contract. So in the wake of the announcement to replace its vehicle fleet with mostly gas-powered vehicles, even though Biden wanted to make it all electric, lawmakers are questioning that possible insiders trading and stuff is going on. What do you think about the whole postal fleet situation and the design of the new postal truck, which people are making fun of?
Yeah, well, I think I probably just read the same article that you did, but there is something a little bit suspicious maybe. There was a massive announcement from Biden shortly after he was elected. We're going to switch the entire U.S. federal vehicle fleet to electric. And then, merely 2 weeks later or something, these postal vans were announced, and they're going to be 90% fossil fuel, apparently. And yes, they're looking into some possible insider trading that happened the day before this announcement because the company making these gas guzzlers, obviously their stock shot up. But yeah, it definitely sounds a bit hinky. I don't know what else to say.
What did you call it? Hinky? Hinky?
It's hinky. It's a bit hinky.
Hinky. Okay. That's a word that I don't use. There's a lot of words I don't use. VW announces its own Tesla-like battery day. You've heard about that, obviously. We'll produce cells
we'll be able to talk about it next week. I think it's March 15th. So, it's, as we've said many times before, really the next 10 years is really going to be about scaling up, and the scaling, the slowest part of scaling up is going to be battery production. So he who can secure the most batteries in this transition in the next 10 years is going to be the winner. So yeah, Tesla, VW seems more than other car makers to be modeling themselves after what Tesla is doing. So they too are going to tell us what their battery strategy is at a battery.
Well, we look forward to that, and we'll be covering it here on the show. Do you think that they will be the number 2 leader in this field?
That's what it's seeming like. Yeah, that they seem to be spending the most money and taking this the most seriously.
Okay, follow-up question. Is there a battery shortage? Is there a constraint there worldwide?
Yes, absolutely. And I think there will be for the next 10 years because, everyone's just doing it as fast as they can, but the batteries are the slowest thing to make.
And I think that affects grid storage too, because it seems to me if you're like Tesla, you're putting most of your batteries into vehicles because you want to, that's maybe the highest profit margin rather than one giant battery project. So.
Exactly. They have to spread their batteries around and use them in the most efficient way. But that was also what was really interesting about Tesla Battery Day was they talked so much about diversifying the chemistry of their batteries. So, nickel is going to be the biggest component in their high-end batteries, but they've realized that the actual supply of nickel in the world is going to be constrained for the next several years. So they came out with, the iron phosphate chemistry. So they don't necessarily want to make everything iron phosphate, but they know that they have to because the supply of nickel is going to be limited.
Tesla's Elon Musk supports a future with free education for the planet. This is a bit of an aside here. He's donating $5 million to the Khan Academy. Do you have any thoughts on his idea here of free education for the planet? Sounds nice.
Well, I think we're definitely moving in that direction. There's so much you can learn now for free on the internet. I think in Canada, it's still, you still kind of need a degree in some ways to sort of prove that you're a real person. But, I don't think you actually need what you learn there. It's more the, you need the piece of paper still. But what you can learn now on the internet is astounding.
So you're teaching film production from your bomb shelter where you do the podcast. Is it possible Russians are hacking in and getting an education from you?
Damn those Russians. Getting the free education.
Suddenly there's all these Russian films going to the Academy Award Best Foreign Language Film category next year.
Yeah, I have that effect on my students.
Of course you do. All right, this has been another segment of What Do You Think?
What do you think?
So we covered the last two, so I wanted to cover the latest launch of the SpaceX Starship rocket. It's not exactly clean energy news, but it's one of Elon Musk's other companies. And it's a fascinating project. They're trying to launch the Starship rocket that will eventually go to Mars. And the first two, unfortunately, blew up on landing. There's this elaborate belly flop maneuver that they're trying to perfect with these rockets where it comes down horizontal, then flips vertical and lands. And they didn't quite make it the last two. This one was more successful, and we have a clip.
Third time's a charm, as the saying goes. We've had a successful soft touchdown on the landing pad. That's capping a...
And then it blew up, which was also fun. But
it sure did. The damn live stream ended, and I started reading about it on Twitter afterwards. It's like, what? Because you could see like little flames coming out. There was some sort of a fuel or methane leak, and and it landed. It looked like it had a soft landing on the pad, but then you could sort of see it bounce up a bit. I don't think that actually had anything to do with it. I just think they had a leak. I don't know if you've heard anything about that.
Yeah, well, it didn't. Yeah, it was still a hard landing, so some of the landing legs didn't fully work, or they, collapsed a little bit. So it was leaning. It was a little bit on fire, but they landed it. There's some spectacular slow motion video out there on YouTube if anyone wants to look for it. So lots of people were nearby filming it in slow motion, and so they all kept running, thankfully, because it was many, many minutes later after that it actually blew up. But lots of people were still running their cameras, so there's really excellent slow motion footage of it finally exploding, and then birds fly by in the foreground. It's awesome.
They seem to be doing. I read about this that they're have a different approach than NASA. NASA tests everything. They don't want anything blowing up. Whereas SpaceX, it's okay to blow up. We're going to learn from it. So that they don't have everything perfect. They just throw them into the sky, see what happens, and they can do things faster that way. They can learn things faster if they know these things are disposable for the first few times. I have a question, though. Do you know why it does the belly landing? Like, I don't understand why that's necessary. Why it has to go butt first down to the ground again, but then it has to go horizontal. What is it to help slow it, or?
I don't know for sure, but I think it's just because it's a much bigger rocket that it would just take too much thrust because it's bigger and heavier. So it's because it's bigger, it's a better way to scrub off the speed that they need to scrub off. You know, you can slow it down mostly with just the body of the rocket.
Did you see the footage that SpaceX had of it as it went from belly to? Yeah, it looks like CGI. Like, I mean, you're right there. It looked like a movie. It was crazy good. Like, I had to question.
No, it looks fake. And that was on the live broadcast, too, where they had a camera right from the ground. It was, amazing, but it's true. It kind of looked fake.
It's amazing that things are getting so good now that we're questioning reality looks fake. That it used to be the other way around. Anyway, we better move on. Because it's been so much time. I've got some feedback for us this week. I've promised to read our Apple iTunes, Apple Podcast reviews. If you'd like to review us and give us a rating, it helps podcasts. It's just one of those things podcasters have to ask for. Go to Apple iTunes, rate, and preferably review. We have a anonymous subscriber here who says, I really enjoy this podcast. It is so well produced, it could be on CBC Radio 1. And I know your heart just warmed, Brian.
Wow, that's high praise. Us and Peter Mansbridge.
I like hearing about their EV cars and what's going on with the green world. And I have no doubt that my next car will be an EV. Heck, maybe even my bicycle too. Keep up the good work. Thank you, whoever you are. We really appreciate that. And go to Apple iTunes and review us. It helps a lot. Coming up later in the show, the lightning round.
Australia, one of their last brown coal power stations, is going to close early in favor of a giant battery. So Australia uses a lot of coal power. This one particular plant was built way back in the 1970s. It was scheduled to close in 2028, but they're closing it 4 years early, which is amazing. And it isn't totally going to be replaced with a battery pack. But it's solar, wind, and batteries are going to be enough to get rid of this thing.
Yeah, so Australia has a bit of a different economics involved because they have such a bad power grid that batteries are working incredible magic, and they're making money like crazy. They're saving money like crazy. It's good to see. And whenever we make predictions on the show or talk about other people's predictions, it's not universal, the date when something starts. It sort of starts in one jurisdiction that makes financial sense, and then it spreads to another, and it'll eventually get to all jurisdictions. I'm really looking forward to, we've had municipalities put up and First Nations put up small battery grid storage stuff here, but not the grid itself. I wish they'd be doing that. That's just so silly that they're not doing that and studying it and just getting used to the idea, I guess. They don't have to do it on a large scale, but just get it going, I wanted to talk about gravity power because you were talking about gravity power before on the show. And apparently they're experimenting with all kinds of different ways. You talked about a crane once that lifted these big, heavy 5,000-pound blocks up with solar power when there was excess solar during the day. And then you lower the 5,000-pound blocks down at night, and that turns a turbine and creates electricity by doing that. While there's other things, they're putting like these rods in water underground and sort of pumping the water out, and then the rod sort of goes down deep on its own and it pulls a turbine, and they're studying that in places. And there's just different places, different ways of actually using gravity other than just water pumped up on a reservoir. They're experimenting with different ways to do that. I just wanted to mention that. And then a few days ago, I listened to Elon Musk. No, I didn't listen to Elon Musk. I listened to Sandy Munroe talking about Elon Musk. You remember when Sandy Munroe and his president of his company, Munroe and Associates, took a Model 3 and traveled across country and eventually ended up talking to Elon at SpaceX. And,
yeah, it was a nice interview that came out, a few weeks ago.
They told the story of that. I guess they were in San Francisco, and they said, "Can you be here in 36 hours?" So they had to drive around the clock, and they got there just in time because they made a mistake. They couldn't get across a river, and I guess it was an interesting story of how things work because they didn't know they were going to be going there. They just sort of documented their road trip, and people sort of took notice, and then Elon's assistant phoned them, or somebody phoned them saying, "I know Elon's assistant phone number, and would you like to do this?" And then they did it. And anyway, I have a clip here of them talking about how, because they got to sit in on a discussion at SpaceX, and Elon was there, and Elon was not just sitting around tapping his finger looking at his phone. He was instrumental in coming up with ideas and formulas and things, and he would stay there late into the night. This is a clip of Sandy talking about Elon Musk's work ethic.
The thing that I thought was even more amazing was I shook his hand and he said, "We're going to have a design review. You want to stick around?" We spent 2 hours watching a design review. I was blown away. I've seen dozens of CEOs. I've never seen a CEO ever, or a president, that knew more about the product, that knew the details of a product, that could bring an idea and discuss it, not just in grandiose hand waving kind of, but hey, let's use this formula and rattle off a formula, or rattle off a material, or rattle off a process that is kind of obscure unless you're like a detail engineer. I was blown away by that.
We walk out into the parking lot. There's still a couple dozen cars there. People are bustling around, and Elon is still inside that building, approaching 11.
Crazy. It's crazy. This separates Elon from every other company leader in the world, don't you think?
Yeah, it's definitely what gives them their edge, I would think.
I mean, he's inventing things. He's solving problems. Him, the cop guy. They can't find people smarter than him.
But it's also the thing that puts them at risk because, of course, he's so instrumental to these various companies that, there's always a chance they would collapse after he leaves.
I hope his health is good. I hope his security is good. So Canada, Brian, has announced a bus investment. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so this was a big announcement from the federal government. They're going to put $2.75 billion over the next 5 years in zero emissions public transit and school buses. So they're going to be handing out grants and subsidies to help everybody turn their transit to electric. So this is a part of what I would call kind of post-COVID, restructuring and stimulation of the economy.
Do you think it's going to be effective?
Yeah, I think so. Everyone in Canada loves free money from the government. It's like our pastime here.
Will it motivate people, though, to, like, our transit is one of the transit places in Canada that does not have even a hybrid bus, let alone an electric bus, whereas other jurisdictions, even ones in colder climates than us, are all over this. They're like Edmonton is going all in on this. Toronto's the biggest one in North America. Will people like us just say that we can't refuse? Because I know that charging infrastructure is going to be an issue for buses, because it's a big, charging a fleet of buses is not something you can plug into your wall with a 110 cord. You need to have a big connection to the grid. Yeah, and that's definitely part of the spending here. It isn't just for the buses themselves. Yeah, it's for the charging infrastructure too. So the power grid, the power companies should be giving, the States, I'm always amazed that they give like a couple $1,000s for buying an EV. How sweet is that? God, America, I love you. You do things that we would never do, and we're supposed to be the socialist country. Come on. It is strange sometimes how that works, yeah. Right. We better get going, Brian. It is time for the lightning round.
The Clean Energy Show lightning round. The lightning round hits James against Brian in a flurry of headlines from this week's news. Let's begin here now. James Woodingham.
Brian, this is where we clean up the extra headlines from the news. We don't leave anything on, well, we leave a few things on the ground. It's getting late. It's late in the episode. So Elon Musk lost $27 billion last week. Your comments?
Yeah, that was almost as much as I lost. Tesla stock went on a nosedive, but then yesterday it was back up like almost 20% in one day, which was a crazy swing for such a large company.
They had really good China numbers leaking out about how well they are doing in China. The competition is getting sort of blown away. Today, on our regular segment, How Rich is Brian? The Tesla stock is up $10.68 or 1.59% on the day. And on the week, it's a little down on the week, but it's coming around. It's coming around. I was thinking about buying when it was at a low point there. That it is still volatile. It still goes up and down, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. It's still one of the most volatile stocks. I really thought it would. I mean, I think it still will even out at some point, like the S&P 500 inclusion, you know, the gigantic market cap that it's become. It will definitely stabilize at some point where we won't have these wild swings anymore.
Wells Fargo, the big bank in the United States, is net zero by 2050, which is hilarious coming from the seventh largest financier of fossil fuels in the world. Do you have a mockery statement on that?
Yeah, 2050. That's we'll be dead by then.
What I mean, their money counters can't run on solar, like the cash counters or the lights. I mean, what is are they funding net zero? I don't know, but screw Wells Fargo. There, I said it. The Kennedy family fought it. The Trump administration held it up. And now the Biden administration is backing the nation's biggest wind farm, Martha's Vineyard. The Kennedy family didn't want to look at it. It's off. The United States doesn't have a lot of ocean wind power offshore. They didn't want to look at it. So they put it a bit south, and it's happening. It's going to be the biggest wind project in the United States off of Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah, I mean, I could understand, ruining the ocean view, but I don't know. You got to just put it out far enough, I guess.
Harley-Davidson Livewire electric motorcycle weight increase leads to bigger battery speculation. They've increased the weight of the vehicle. Do you think, having watched The Long Way Up, a great show on Apple TV about Ewan McGregor and his buddy going up through South America on electric motorcycles, prototypes, do you think this is going to change the usability if they did have a larger battery? I assume it would.
Yeah, range is a bit of an issue with these electric motorcycles because they're obviously kind of small, so it's hard to pack in a lot of batteries. So they'll definitely benefit as, energy density increases. So, it sounds like there's probably a bigger battery coming. Still probably won't be the range that some people want, but, we're getting there.
We'll get there with higher density batteries as we improve that throughout this decade. Methane emissions from Russian gas pipelines are up 40% in 2020, despite going down 14% in its gas exports to Europe. The reason why is because without them making money, they didn't maintain them. Those Russians, same people hacking your class.
No, and there was a story a few months ago we talked about on the podcast where a lot of these pipelines are kind of up in the permafrost, if I remember the story correctly.
Yeah.
And the permafrost is not as stable as it once was, and it's, starting to melt and move a bit. So I think that's contributing to it. These pipelines are getting moved around.
We might have touched on this a bit last week. Elon Musk is doubling the size of its full self-driving beta program. Have you heard anything about it coming to Canada, aside from soon?
No, we still don't know, other than, it should be soon. They're going to add a button in the software. So I guess we'll all be getting, maybe not in Canada, but about 10 days from now, some kind of a software update and a button will appear if you want to download the beta. So everyone's just waiting for that at this point.
You're supposed to fill out a form and talk about your driving style. How, Brian Stockton, would you describe your driving style? And honesty is important here.
My driving style is excellent, but I think that won't be an issue anymore. That was, at first they wanted everybody to email and send some information, but now I think it's just going to be a download button. So, if you want it, you press the download button, and then maybe they will say no if they look at the driving data and decide that you're not safe.
I say drive real nice. drive out of the speed limit, drive like a 99-year-old person, and, well, with better vision, but, slow. Anyway, okay, so from RethinkX, this is Tony Seba's think tank. Clara Foods has launched the world's first animal-free pepsin enzyme. We were talking about food as software on the show quite a bit. They claim that this has the same functionality and the same cost competitiveness with animal-derived pepsin. So we're talking about things like gummies. This is one example of what pepsin is used for. So this is just an example that already they are coming up with substitute for animal products that are already at a competitive price. And then it'll only get cheaper from there as the technology expands the volume and, the research has been paid off. So that's cool. One of America's largest pipelines, controlled by special interests like the Koch brothers and Shell, caused the U.S.'s biggest gasoline spill since 1997, and it happened this past summer. And guess what? No one knew about it. We're just hearing about it now. Are you shocked?
No, I am not.
Okay. So I just want to remind people that Volkswagen is aiming for battery electric vehicles to be 70% of sales in Europe in 9 years' time by 2030. They previously had said 35. So that is a big up of the game. They seem to be getting more serious, I hope. GM is considering building a second U.S. battery plant. And other people on the internet are saying, hey, good idea, but we need even more than two. They claim to be accelerating their shift to electric vehicles. Your feelings this week on GM?
Yeah, it's, I think I said it at the beginning. It's the next 10 years is going to be all about battery supply. So, everybody should be announcing as many projects as humanly possible.
Tesla Gigafactory UK appears to be in the works. That is a rumor going around. We like to talk about rumors on the show, don't we? Do you think they'll build a Gigafactory in UK?
Well, there is certainly a history of making cars in the UK. So it's possible. I wouldn't put it above, 20 or 30% chance at this point.
Apparently, they were going to do it until Brexit happened. So maybe the Germany plant would have been in the UK if it wasn't for Brexit. Who knows? So Tesla and LG are in talks to produce a 406080 battery cell at a new factory, and we're going to wrap it up this week with some good news. Well, we're a good news show, Brian, aren't we? Everything's good news in our show, usually, except for the pipeline spills and emissions. I just got to give you a wrap-up from a great guy on Twitter, Assad Razak. China goes for 20% renewables in 2025. They are upping their targets. That is a target 4 years from now, less than 4 years from now. And China's also setting 18% reduction targeted emissions per unit of GDP. So they're getting serious. They're putting numbers on very specific things and showing a commitment to this. Volvo Cars goes 100% electric by 2030. Any thoughts on that before I continue?
No, just that there's a lot of these announcements every week, and now we're starting to get announcements of, acceleration. Somebody makes one of these pronouncements and picks a year like 2025, and then the next thing you know, it's earlier than that.
FedEx goes carbon neutral by 2040. Don't know how they're going to do that with planes, maybe offsetting, and we'll see. Bangladesh scraps 9 coal plants. Coal. Bad news for coal. If you're listening to our show and you're a pro-coal, A, Y, and B, you're just going to get sad news every week. I'm sorry. The SEC is going to boost climate disclosure standards. The people in the environmental community are excited about that. And Nova Scotia set a target for 80% renewables. That's a province in Canada. I have relatives there. Hello to my relatives in Nova Scotia. Ecum Secum, Nova Scotia, a hamlet where my family comes from. And that's all the time.
You made that up. That's not a real place.
It's real. Brian Stockton, it's been a pleasure. And this is our longest show in history. I'm sorry. But we'll see you next week on the Clean Energy Show. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, see you next week.